So this is Cindy Vinson, and
hi,
April O is here with me, and we want to welcome you to this informational webinar around accelerating innovation with the SPRINT program, or Speeding Research Interventions. You have been invited to participate in this webinar because you were identified based on a portfolio review at NCI that your grant may have been potentially eligible, or you may be potentially eligible to participate in this training. We wanted to give you some background about the training, and once we go through the short number of slides that we have, we're going to open it up for questions, and the webinar will be posted on the SPRINT website so that others that aren't able to join the webinar are able to benefit from seeing and listening to the webinar as well. Hold on, got to actually learn how to do this correctly. So this is the SPRINT program. SPRINT was actually designed initially based on the National Science Foundation's Innovation Core. Sorry, I've got a little technical help going on here. It's designed so that NCI can help foster and grow an innovative ecosystem for behavioral interventionists. We discovered, April and I and a number of members from our team here in the Division of Cancer Control and Population Sciences, had gone through a very similar course several years ago, trying to understand how to better support behavioral researchers and moving their research into practice. And we stumbled across the I-Core program as part of that training. And what this training provides is some real-world, hands-on training on how to take your interventions from cancer control and help make them market-ready. Our goal in this training is really to help you create research-tested interventions that can be put into real-world practice. We have designed this training so that an investigator can bring a team together that will help learn about product market fit of their intervention. And the teams that participate in SPRINT actually gather data that helps them build a business model for their intervention. April's going to jump in whenever she feels like it here, but do you want to jump in?
Sure, I'll jump in right now. So as part of the SPRINT program, we, as Cindy mentioned, we work really closely with the NSF I-Core and also with the NCI SBIR office, or Small Business Innovation Research Office. And what we did is we developed this SPRINT curriculum. So this is a 2-month-long team-based training which will allow you as a team lead or as a PI on the project to work to identify what is your market, who are your customers for your intervention, who are the potential partners that might implement your intervention in real-world practice, and who are also the competitors of your innovation. Part of that curriculum, part of that engagement involves an exercise of encountering what the real-world factors are with implementation, some of the uncertainty that's involved when you move your product into the real-world marketplace, and opportunities for commercialization. So we have two really great instructors that are experienced in innovation, have either started their own business, and also are instructors as part of the NSF I-Core. In fact, one of them is actually a regional node and director for the NSF I-Core. So as part of the requirements for this course, you'll have to have at least, at minimum, 2 to 3 participants. That includes one person who's identified as your entrepreneurial lead, the PI of your R01 project, and it's optional. You could include a mentor. A mentor is going to be someone who is external to your group, who has had experience either starting their own business or industry experience in the area where your intervention is the fit. But of course, that is optional, and that's external to really the curriculum. You would be able to achieve all the milestones in the curriculum without a mentor as well. It is time intensive, the SPRINT program. you know, it's one of those things where as much as you put into it, you get so much more exponentially back. So it does involve 10 to 15 hours per week for the team, and we do expect that the entrepreneurial lead will spend about 20% of their time during this 2-month curriculum. There's weekly WebExes, lectures, workshops, and 2 in-person meetings. So just so you get a sense of what the syllabus might include during those 2 months, here's just an example. But if you go to our Sprint website, you can actually see the syllabus from the last cohort and kind of dig in a little bit to see what some of the classes might cover. Next slide. So you received a notice about Sprint from your program director, or maybe from April or I. And in that notice, it tells you a little bit about the content of the course. So the teams that are selected to participate in Sprint receive $21,750, and that is not designed to cover all of your expenses related to participating in the course. It really is designed to cover costs related to travel, to come to the in-person meeting, supplies that you may have, and also travel that you may have in order to do client interviews. There are funds that you could use as part of this if you have any left over to go towards recovery of indirect costs, but we're limiting that amount to $6,750. So as April mentioned, the teams include the PI and an entrepreneurial lead, and then an optional mentor. We really push teams to do a lot of interviews, and these are different interviews than what you may be used to as part of your research project, but these are interviews with customers who would actually be using your intervention, taking your intervention and putting it into practice in their system. So for some, it may be nonprofit organizations, insurance companies, school districts, et cetera. But we're going to be working with you to identify who those customers might be and helping you to make connections. Every week that you participate in the course, or that the teams participate in the course, they actually do presentations that update all of the teams on what they've done, what they found out, and what they're struggling with. And the goal of this course is to really come up with what we term a minimal viable product, and this is a product that you could be moving into practice. It's really thinking about the business model and what would you take and put into practice. At the end of this, you'll also be developing a video presentation that's given at the end of the course. And that does sometimes stress people out, but it actually, I think, is a nice way to synthesize what you've learned, where you're going, and describe what you're taking out of the course. Oops, did I skip a slide? Nope.
Okay. Oh, so for the in-person piece of this, we do have a 3-day kickoff. There are 6 weekly webinars, a 1-day closeout, and we're recruiting for the 3rd cohort. Our first cohort went from July 2016 through September 2016, and this year we had our 2nd cohort running from April 2017 through June 2017.
So some of the benefits of Sprint. So you've heard a little bit about the curriculum and a little bit about what you get as a team if you're selected as a Sprint team. But some of the other benefits that we see as outcomes are identifying a market for your intervention, gain an appreciation of what it takes to actually commercialize your healthcare delivery or your behavioral intervention into practice, some of the barriers to adoption of that intervention. You also will gain a tool set that can be applied to many different situations, whether your goal is to actually have your intervention be sold in the marketplace. That does not necessarily have to be the focus. It could also be that the lessons learned and the tool set that you gain actually help you frame some of your research questions for your upcoming R01, whether you apply for another R01 grant to NCI or to the DNI NCI funding announcement, or if you're considering an SBIR. All of these tool sets help you gain that perspective and how to frame and what is the actual marketplace and applied setting in which you can deliver your intervention. So there's a lot of efficiency that's built in once you have that perspective in training. You can save time and money by accelerating understanding of the real value of your intervention. And then also through all of the interviews that Cindy mentioned, you're really expanding, you're having that carved out time for yourself and your team to expand your network to identify those within industry, those within academia, and those within government and external to be able to think about your next steps for your intervention.
So Tara Loomis, who is one of the folks from VentureWell who actually runs the program for us, just sent a chat and reminded me it's actually a 1.5-day closeout that we are incorporating this round. So I'm going to let you take this one since it's evaluation, April.
Sure. So in case folks on the line are kind of wondering what has been the experience of our Sprint teams after going through this curriculum. So we did do some evaluation and wanted to share some of those results with you. We took a mixed methods approach, so we did surveys and also focus groups with the teams that participated in our past 2 cohorts. And the results of participants really expressed that there was a paradigm shift for them, that they really gained knowledge about business model concepts, particularly in the area of customer segments. And these are things that you are traditionally trained in as a behavioral scientist. So that was very beneficial to the participants. And then also the customer discovery process, all of those interviews that Cindy and I were talking about, it feels daunting to think about 40 interviews, but we actually found that a lot of the participants and the Sprint teams found once they started the interviews, it just kept rolling and they wanted to talk to more and more people. And oftentimes by the end of Sprint, people don't stop at 40 or 30 interviews. Some of them go up to 50 or over 50 and some up to 60 interviews because they find that as they're talking to their potential clients or customers that they're learning more and they're identifying more ways to innovate on their intervention. They're finding new pathways or new approaches that they can take when they're thinking about commercialization. So we have one teeny tiny quote here on the left side of the screen, so I'll read it out to everyone. So for one of the focus group participants, they said, "My involvement in Sprint program has revolutionized the way I think about my work. I will now much more carefully think about something I propose to develop can fit within the existing environment and what pains I can relieve and gains can be achieved using the tools I intend to build. I will employ a discovery process." This is a process that we've talked about over on this webinar to inform projects I take on as well, going beyond the literature to provide qualitative preliminary results supporting my approach. I'll also consider dissemination strategies from the beginning of the project development rather than at the end. I feel extremely privileged to have had the opportunity to participate in Sprint. So overall, too, I wanted to share that over 92 participants in the cohort rated the course as good or very good. 84 to 86% of participants said that they would recommend Sprint to their peers. And all respondents reported that they gained new knowledge and felt confident after they left the program that they could apply the skills and new knowledge to their work, and also that the course was relevant to their needs and interests. And the information that they gained will help them develop their future interventions and programs throughout their future career.
So hopefully you're starting to get excited about what you've heard about Sprint, but now we want to let you know about the eligibility for Sprint. So in order to qualify for Sprint, a PI must have had an NCI-funded R01 within the last 10 years, and the R01 should be focusing on the design, testing, delivery, and or implementation of a behavior change intervention or tool to advance cancer prevention and control. For current grantees, the grantee must be in good standing. The team that you submit has to include the PI and an entrepreneurial lead. At least one team member has to contribute at least 20% of their time to the sprint training, and that's generally the entrepreneurial lead. And the team must show that they have an interest in dissemination and implementation, or at least that's a plus in the application process, but they don't have to have experience in that area. So we have a very specific timeline for this new cohort that we're recruiting for. Our applications opened earlier this month, but applications are due on November 3rd, which is, what, a week and a half from now? The application is not daunting. It's not like an NIH grant application. It's fairly simple. We're doing the informational webinar today, but once applications are received, we'll be setting up phone interviews that will happen the week of November 13th. And then VentureWell, Tara Loomis, will actually be notifying teams that are selected for participation. When you agree to participate in Sprint, you agree to participate in all of the webinars, the in-person workshops, both the opening and the closing, and all of the WebEx courses. So that is one of the agreements that you sign when you say that you want to participate. So our opening workshop is going to be February 7th through 9th in Rockville, Maryland, and the closeout workshop is in person in Rockville, April 3rd through 4th. WebEx courses are going to be every Wednesday from 1 to 4:30 p.m. Eastern Time for the 8 weeks during the course. So we can go to the website if you have questions, and we can also, everybody has been muted on this, but we'd ask for those of you who have questions to unmute your phones, and I'd actually like to see if Tara has anything that she'd like to add from VentureWell, since she's been running this for us and for other organizations for a long period of time. So Tara, do you mind?
No, not at all. Thank you, Cindy and April. Glad you guys are interested in joining the Sprint cohort. The application is live, and as Cindy said, it is not daunting. We actually put limits on how many words you can put in the box. So we look forward to getting your applications. The Sprint program is really dynamic, and it gives you an opportunity to really go out and explore your ideas and see if there's a potential business and how to get your research disseminated in a very productive way. So we're very excited to partner with NCI on this project again and look forward to hearing from you.
So now's the interactive part. You can either type your question in the chat box, or you can unmute your phone and ask us questions live. I have put up on our screen the application page. It's pretty straightforward. It tells you the application process, the eligibility, and you just have to go through and enter the information here. It'll go into our system, and then we'll be contacting everyone to do interviews that submits applications.
Yeah, and I just want to note, too, the application is really quick, very short. You provide some background about yourself and your team, and then also just a short paragraph about your project. So do any folks have questions?
So in the chat, it says the application says there can be a co-I. Can you expand upon the role of this person, and are they also required to attend the all the workshops and the training? Tara, what did we decide on that? I can't remember. I know that co-Is, we want to limit the number of people per team.
Right. There would be no more than a total of 3 in attendance, and if you have a co-PI and not a mentor, that's fine. You know, as you said, you highly recommended mentors, but having 2 co-PIs or co-EL is acceptable.
Okay, and then there's a question from Judy. Can an entrepreneurial lead be a research assistant? Absolutely. I think that Dee was a research assistant for Deborah, and that's frequently the case, that it's a postdoc or someone that's working with you but may not have PI status. It needs to be someone who can dedicate that amount of time to help going out and setting up the interviews, filling out the business canvas, keeping things tracked, et cetera.
Yes, I would definitely say that we had a good mix of research assistants, PIs, and postdocs who served as the entrepreneurial leads. So yes, as long as they're available and can do the work, then that's great.
And so Simon is actually asking, he's in year 1 of a 5-year phase 1 RCT and wants to know if there's advice about when's the best time to do this. We have had investigators participate at all different stages of their research project. We've had some that have been in their first year and have actually found it very beneficial to participate because it's helped them think about how to design their intervention with dissemination ultimately in mind. We've also had investigators that are very experienced, have 20 years plus experience, and are still trying to figure out how to move their interventions into practice. So I don't think that there is a set answer of when is the best time. It does have to do with, do you have the time available? I think that you can benefit from this at any time during your research project. April, what do you think?
Absolutely. I'm just remembering that we had someone in our first cohort who was in year 1.5, like they had just done a 1.5 years or maybe going into 2 years, and actually found that the program was so helpful that they worked with their program director after the SPRINT program to talk about how they could continue their current grant but in a different focused way. So keeping their same research aims but changing a bit of the approach. And strategically it was more advantageous for them too because they realized, hey, I can actually target my intervention more efficiently to the population I'm thinking about. So that way after at the end of this R01, I can think about an implementation science grant or I can think about an SBIR. So I think that there's advantages to that, certainly, and then also those who already have their intervention and ready to go. Like, for example, we had someone in the last cohort who had an app, and they were really thinking about how can I get this app out there or a specific curriculum, and so there's certainly advantages there as well. But that's what's nice about this program is that the discovery of the market and the development of this tool set, it's going to help you no matter what phase you are in your research project.
The next question asks about mentors, and I'm going to let Tara jump in here because there's a couple of questions around mentors. So the first one is the mentor required to attend the workshops in Rockville and the WebEx trainings? Tara, do you want to take a stab at this, or do you want us to jump in? Tara's on mute, so I'm going to jump in. For the first 2 cohorts, we really ask that the cohorts attend the in-person training, but it's important that the mentor understand that they are not required to do all of the interviews. They aren't there to do the work. They're there to actually mentor the team and help make connections. Participating in the in-person helps them understand what the content of the course is so that they can help advise, but they aren't there to be a full team member. So, Tara, do you want to add into that?
Yeah, I think you surmised that pretty well. The importance of the mentor participating from start to finish is that they have an understanding of what it is that is expected of you and that they can be as supported as they can. If you have a mentor that you want it to be part of your project, but the time commitment is such that they can attend, that's acceptable. But again, they have to have an understanding of what it is that is expected of you and assist you in that. And the best way to do that is to be fully present.
Yeah, and then the next question has to do with having a mentor that might potentially be applying to I-Corps for an SBIR. And can that person still be a mentor without an application form? We don't require the mentor to apply to us. They get submitted on your application. I think that the mentor process for SBIR, I-Corps is a bit different, but Tara, you manage both. Can you give some highlight on that?
Yeah, if you have a mentor that signs up for Sprint with you, you just are going to put their name and their contact information in the application. That's all we need from you. That way we can communicate with them in terms of setting up the interview if they want to be a part of that, and making sure that they have all the logistics to get to the actual in-person and the links to the webinars. When you apply for an I-Corps through NSF or an I-Corps through NIH SBIR, it's a totally different process, and they have to approve your mentors. So this is not as rigorous as that. So if you want a mentor to come and they're going to be already involved in NIH, all you have to do is give us their name and a little bit of information about them. Double checking the application right now.
And I'm just going to let you keep chiming in here. So a question came up about if all team members need to be available each Wednesday for the seminars, for the webinars. Since it's generally the PI and the entrepreneurial lead, we really would like to have them participating in each webinar. Life does happen. Sometimes things crowd in, but we don't want it to be expected that only one person from a team is going to participate each week, because people hear different things and different feedback from the faculty on these webinars, and we think it's really good to have both members there so that they're both benefiting from the feedback. Tara, what do you, would you agree with that?
Again, I think the PI and the EL should be on every webinar for that consistency. You're going to be presenting from week to week what you did, what you thought you learned, what you're going to do next. You're going to be getting critiques directly from the teaching team, and you want to be able to incorporate that, and it's much easier for the person who's presenting to hear it and the person who's not presenting to take the notes and then incorporate it back into a conversation after the WebEx. So it is important that it's not one person on the team attending the WebExes. In both the NIH program and the NSF program, the only reasons you can't miss a WebEx is death or illness, and they're pretty strict about that. So from a consistency perspective and getting the most out of this program, and I think that's the most important thing I want to stress, is that this is a self-directed learning program, and we want you to join it. We want you to get the most out of it. You will only get as much out of it as you're willing to put in terms of your time and your commitment. And that means showing up to these webinars and getting that feedback and being engaged and listening to not just what the teaching team says about your team and your idea, but also what the other teams are getting, because in a learning environment, you learn from everyone in that process.
And then a question came in about if you have a new R01 and your potential entrepreneurial lead has not been hired yet, should you still apply? I'm going to just be really candid. Part of the project is being able to work with the person and being able to have it's a pretty intense project. If the person hasn't been hired yet, you may not know if they're the best fit for the entrepreneurial lead role. So you may want to wait for a later cohort so that you could put down a person as an entrepreneurial lead that you have a great relationship with. It would be hard if you hired someone and halfway through it wasn't a good fit and you had to switch. But that's just my personal opinion. Tara, what do you think?
Yeah, team dynamics is so important in this process. Because you're going to be relying heavily on one another to ensure that the interviews are getting done, that the data is being entered into the core software management system, that you're out there testing the right hypotheses, and you want to make sure that, if this is someone you can work with, someone you can rely on, someone you can trust, and that's an important factor.
Okay, so there is another question asking about budget. And I know, Terry, you fielded a lot of these questions, and I want to make sure that we're being consistent across cohorts. So one of the questions is, can the budget be used to pay for entrepreneurial leads' time and effort, and can the money be used to pay for stakeholders to participate in the interview for incentives? What's the party line on that, Tara?
Okay, so I'll take the first question. Yes, an entrepreneurial lead can be compensated for their time, but please keep in mind that the primary purpose of the grant is to travel to and from Rockville, Maryland, There will be a nominal registration fee. We're talking a few $100s to cover the cost of food during the workshop. So travel, hotel, and a registration fee. But then any other customer discovery. Customer discovery is the primary portion of this grant. Now, that leads right into the second question. Incentives, you want to take them for a cup of coffee, you want to take them out, if they want to meet you for lunch, if that's what you're considering an incentive, that's acceptable if your university allows it. So this is where your university's policies and procedures come into play, because the money goes to you, but through your university. So if taking someone out to lunch is the best way to get their time and attention to customer discovery, we encourage that. Make sure it's acceptable within your own department and university practices.
And I want to let you know that when we're talking about interviews, this isn't your typical research interview. You're not going to be writing up a protocol. We really they're more like coffee chat,
talks, yeah.
Going out and trying to pick someone's brain about what you should be doing and what would work in their situation. So you're not going to have a protocol that you're following. It's not going to be an hour worth of structured interviews that you're going to be doing some qualitative or quantitative analysis of afterwards. This is different than what you've done in the past.
Yeah,
so
that's a good point, Cindy. It's not research. It's
not research, although we have in the past done like an overarching IRB for teams whose institutions require it, but it is not research.
And it's already the exemption, so that's an exemption.
Yes. Okay. Thank you. So we do have that exemption certificate, so if folks need that, we'd have a copy of those who are participating in the Sprint. But again, and at the beginning of the Sprint training program, we do have a brief training about how these interviews are really different from research and how you can structure these interviews. It's really about like these coffee talks where you're just really trying to understand what someone does or what their industry is like, what's the opportunity for your product or your intervention. So it's more conversational than it is a research interview.
Then another investigator wants to know that, if they have several interventions that are being created or in the developmental phase, should the application focus on one intervention? Yes. Can you apply this to your other interventions? Yes. But pick one that you really think offers potential for being adopted by a system, by a practice, being put into a larger context, and put that forward. Our goal is not that it's going to be a one-off. Hopefully this is something that you're incorporating in your research from here on out, but pick one that you think would be the best fit. Feel free, if you want, to unmute yourself and ask questions or continue to type in. I'm going to give you guys a couple of more seconds for typing in any Q&A. And then we're going to
pop our contact information back up so that if you have questions after this webinar, you can email Cindy and I directly.
So there is our email address. We hope that you have found this webinar useful. We hope that we see applications from you, and we hope that we get to work with you on Sprint in the future, if not this cohort, a future cohort. So feel free to reach out to us with any additional questions. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to go ahead and sign off. And thank you, Tara. Thank you, April. Thank you, Sarah. We're going to end the webinar and stop the recording.
Great. Thank you, everyone. Thanks for your interest.